this week's Game of Thrones video, we're going to do another epic Targaryen history, talking about the 4th Targaryen king of Westeros, Jaehaerys I. If you want to hear about the first 3 Targaryen kings of Westeros, you can click below and learn about Aegon, Aenys, and Maegor the Cruel, and then come back and watch this video. Jaehaerys I came to the throne in 48 AC when he was only 14 years old. He came at a time after Maegor the Cruel, his uncle, had majorly screwed up the realm. There was rebellious lords, the Faith were like anti-Targaryens, there was just trouble everywhere. And Jaehaerys would actually prove to be a very wise and wonderful king. He would be the oldest living Targaryen king, and by the time he was done and the throne passed on to Viserys I, there would be a full treasury, there would be peace in the realm, and there would be goodwill everywhere. It's to note that Jaehaerys originally was 3rd in line, so Maegor the Cruel was his uncle and the 3rd king of Westeros, and he actually took away the throne from Aegon, who was Jaehaerys' eldest brother, who should have inherited the throne, but Maegor came and said, "Nope, I'm taking the throne, my brother's dead, it's my turn. You know, screw you guys for inheritance," and actually ended up killing Jaehaerys' 2 older brothers, Aegon in battle, and then Viserys basically torturing him and then leaving him in a courtyard for a fortnight to rot. So Jaehaerys really, was 3rd in line and only inherited it because his uncle, who was the 3rd king, ended up just wiping out his 2 older brothers. He was super terrible. But, in a way, this might have been a good thing, because Jaehaerys was actually a really good king. He was a fine warrior, he was skilled with lance and bow, he was a dragon rider, he was a gifted horseman, he was decisive in both deed and thought, he was wise beyond his years, and unlike Maegor, who just, was cruel and wanted it his way, and unlike Aenys, who just couldn't make a decision, Jaehaerys was always trying to find the most peaceful option for everything. He always wanted things to end in the most peaceful way possible, and that really made him a great king. Being only 14 when he came to the throne, he obviously needed help, so his mother, the before Queen Alyssa, ended up guiding him along with Lord Robar of House Baratheon, who was named Lord Protector of the Realm and the Hand, ended up kind of guiding him until he was in his majority, and he wed his sister, Allison. And that, let me tell you what, was a beautiful marriage. They absolutely loved each other. It was very fruitful. They had 2 little spats, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but besides that, it was an awesome marriage. And he really, as gifted as he was as a king, his wife, Queen Allison, was an amazing ruler as well. She was so loved throughout the realm. She was beautiful, she was intelligent, she was kind, she was high-spirited, she was charming. And a lot of people said that she ruled just as much as the king. Allison was the one that got rid of right of first night. So if you don't know what the right of first night is, you can think of it this way. So let's say Ned Stark, was the warden of the north, and if anyone in his little realm of protection was getting married, he would have the right to sleep with the bride before the groom did. So that's the Lord's right of first night. And Allison was like, "Nope, this is creepy, we need to get rid of this, this isn't going to be allowed anymore." And, this actually was really great for women everywhere, because think about it, you're marrying someone and then some guy you don't know gets to sleep with you first. Kinda creepy. So some of the lords were a little upset about that because, they really cherished first night, right of first night. But getting rid of it was kind of an awesome thing, especially for women. The Night's Watch also really loved her. She ended up donating a bunch of money and jewels for them to build a new castle, Deep Lake, because their other castle was just ruinous, it was out of repair, it was costing too much to upkeep, called Night Fort. She also gave them the new gift, which was more territory, which added to their strength and really helped the Night's Watch out a lot. They loved her so much that they had a castle named Snowgate, and in honor, they dubbed it Queen's Gate instead. So Jaehaerys and her had a really great, strong marriage. They were married for 46 years, and they had tons of children and grandchildren, but here are their 2 spats. The first one really isn't important, and only lasted about a year or 2, but the second one was due to, we could say that Allison was a little bit of a feminist. So Jaehaerys in 92 AC, so he's been ruling a while, keep in mind he started in 48 AC, decided to overpass his granddaughter Rhaenys, the daughter of his deceased eldest son and heir, Prince Aemon, in favor of giving Dragonstone to his next eldest son, Balon the Brave. Allison was super upset with this. She said, you know, your oldest son's child should have inherited Dragonstone. That was her right. Just because she's a woman, you're overpassing her, and that's not cool. If women are of so little use to you, then you have no use for me, and I'm out of here. And she ended up leaving, and it just tore him apart. And even though they eventually reconciled, it's said that even to his deathbed, the rift between them and even the tiny year or so apart still hung over him, and he still grieved so much for hurting his wife. So really quick, I'm going to list all the children that Jaehaerys I and Queen Allison had together that ended up living to adulthood, because we know Targaryens ended up having a lot of miscarriages and issues like that. Their first eldest was Prince Aemon, and he would have been the person that inherited the throne, but unfortunately he was killed in battle against Myers Pyrrhus, who had seized the eastern side of Tarth. So his heir ended up dying. His next child was Prince Balon, who eventually became known as Balon the Brave. He actually ended up becoming the third hand of the king for his father. The first hand was Septon Barth, which we'll talk about later, and then a Kingsguard that didn't really do too well and was replaced within a year by Prince Balon. But unfortunately, he was the next heir and he didn't end up making it. And 101 AC, he was hunting, he complained about a little stitch in his side, and then a few days later he died of a burst belly. So most likely he had appendicitis, his appendix, was bothering him and then burst and he ended up dying. The next child was Archmaester Vagin. So he was called the Dragonless, and he was given to the Citadel from an early age, and ended up giving the ring and rod and mask of yellow gold when he became an Archmaester. Next was Princess Dayla. She was wed to Lord Aaron in 80 AC, but unfortunately she died in childbirth, delivering him a daughter, Emma. Next was Princess Alyssa. Alyssa was wed to her brother Balon the Brave, and 2 of her sons would actually come to the throne later. Princess Visera, she was super high-spirited, and, she went to the beat of her own drum, and she ended up racing drunkenly through the streets of King's Landing and fell from her horse and died. Septa Miguel, she was given to the faith as, kind of another way to soothe it over and say that, there's no bad feelings. She grew to become a Septa, and she had a wonderful gift for healing. She had tons of compassion. She actually helped in the second spat between the king and queen, helping them kind of mend it and come back together. And she helped mostly nurse children who had grayscale back to health until, unfortunately, in 96 AC, she ended up getting the same affliction and dying. Princess Sarah, so she was also given to the faith, but she did not have the temperament of her sister, and she ended up running away, eventually went to Old Volantis, and ended up becoming the proprietor of a very well-known pleasure house. And then finally, Princess Gayle. She was the most beloved of the queen. She was very sweet, she was simple-minded. She died in 99 AC. Some saying she died of a summer fever, but really she got seduced by a singing traveler. He ended up getting her pregnant and leaving her, and then in her grief she ended up drowning herself. So as you can see, they had a problem with their children, especially with how old Jaehaerys was before he died, gave up the throne. There was a problem with his heirs ended up dying, so, who should it go to? And this actually became a conflict towards the end of his rule of trying to pick who would indeed rule. After tons of deliberation, his grandchild, Viserys, who was 24 at the time, was decided that he would end up becoming the heir and ruling the realm after Jaehaerys passed away. And in fact, he later did. This whole big issue of trying to find an heir and deciding who should rule, and then Allison getting so upset about females being passed over, actually caused a great council of 101 AC, where they decided, regardless of birth, regardless of order, women are never taken into account, nor their children, when it comes to succession in the throne, and it should always pass through the male descendants. So let's talk about the great accomplishments of Jaehaerys I. which was quite a bit. His hand, after Lord Robar, ended up being Septon Barth, and he was also Jaehaerys' best friend. He went from being the son of a common blacksmith to being given to the faith, to working in the library of the Red Keep, where Jaehaerys and him ended up being introduced to each other, and eventually he ended up appointing Septon Barth to Hand of the King. And he was a brilliant man. There are some Septons that live in our current day Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, that perhaps are a little jelly of him and like to denounce him. But he really was an awesome Hand of the King and a brilliant man, and rose from a plain person to, you know, second in the realm as Hand of the King. So with Barth as his hand, they ended up doing so much good and accomplishing so much in his reign. So if you remember me talking about with Aegon how he left all the little pockets of the realm with their own laws and their own rules, and it was just him trying to integrate himself into Westeros and be like, hey, even though I'm now your king, you know, I know I'm a Targaryen, I just came in, I want you to know that, you know, you all are still you, I'm not making you just one person. And, you know, that was okay for the first Targaryen king, but Jaehaerys started to see the problem with everyone having their own laws and rules. It kind of made chaos in the realm. So he ended up creating the first unified code so that from the north to the Dornish marshes, the realm had a single rule of law. And this helped a lot easing tension between the realms, because the more the realms are segregated, the more they end up having issues. I mean, we even see it nowadays. Like, the more we're segregated and the more this is our spot, these are our rules, the more tension it, you know, creates. And in further uniting the kingdom, they also decided to create roads that connected all of the realms together and created one of the longest roads, the King's Road, which we hear talk about a lot on the show, which ended up stretching hundreds of leagues to Castle Black and the walls. Along with Barth, he ended up creating drains and sewers, and Barth really had this idea where he said fresh water and flushing away of waste is really important to the city's health. So all these, the plumbing, the sewers, the draining, was all Septon Barth's idea, and Jaehaerys went right along with him. He completely agreed, and that really did. That cuts down on disease, that cuts down on illness, it cuts down, or it helps your city be more cleansely, your people healthier, they live longer, and it really was a great move. So think about it. So far, we got this guy that makes a unified law, is knitting the realms together. He creates roads that go everywhere, further knitting them together, and then he's also helping institute things like sewers and drains that are making his people live longer, be healthier. He took it a step further when he ended up patching the rift between the Faith and the Targaryen ruler, which I think, and many other people think, is one of his greatest accomplishments, even though he accomplished so much more in his role. If you watched my Maegor the Cruel video, you'll know that they had a huge problem with Maegor and a problem with Aenys. Maegor ended up marrying multiple wives, which to the Faith is not cool, and Aenys married his children together. That caused some more issues. So there was a big problem. The Faith, one, did not like incest, and they did not like multiple marriages more. So they were hunted down by Maegor. Maegor just slaughtered a bunch of them. So there's some bad blood between the Targaryens and the Faith. And what's cool about Jaehaerys is they were so few that Jaehaerys could have been like, you want to know what? Screw you. You mess with two of the kings. I'm stamping you out for good. There's going to be no more of you. And a lot of people agreed with him and probably would have been like, hey, yeah, you're right. Let's get rid of those nasty Faith people. But instead, Jaehaerys, being so wise and so kind as he did, he's like, no, we're going to make peace for this, we're going to deal with this, and ended up sending his hand, Septon Barth, to Oldstown to talk to the High Septon. And this is where they got a lasting agreement. They basically agreed that the Faith would be held to the same standards as everyone else, because sometimes the Faith, you know, did some things that were pretty questionable and took from people and said, hey, we're the Faith, you can't deal with it. So they agreed, okay, we're going to deal with outside ruling, and we're going to lay down our swords, and we're going to stop fighting you, you're the rightful kings, but at the same time, the Iron Throne is going to swear to always protect the Faith and never bring up arms against it. And after that problem was taken care of, Jaehaerys basically had this awesome peaceful rule. There was tons of Targaryens around, tons of dragons, and in fact with the next king, Viserys I, it would be the time when there was the most Targaryens ever, the most dragons ever, and the Targaryens would be the most powerful they had ever been with the next rule of Viserys, thanks to Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys eventually died at 96. He died after his wife. He ruled for 55 years, and it is said that everybody mourned for his death. You know, even Dorne, which was so stubborn against any rule. The men wept, the women just tore at their clothes. Everyone was so upset because they had so many peaceful, good years under Jaehaerys. Even though the realm would never see the likes of Jaehaerys again, and he was just one of the coolest, greatest Targaryen kings, he was followed by Viserys, who was, you know, a good king too, and the Targaryens were at their most powerful. But Viserys helped come to rise the Dance of the Dragons, which would cause quite a bit of conflict in the realm. So come back next week when we talk about the 5th Targaryen king of Westeros, Viserys I. Otherwise, we do nerdy videos every day. Make sure you like, subscribe, and come back for more geeky videos every day.